Bem-vindos todas, todos.
Hello, welcome everyone to this conversation. We're really happy to have you all here. I'm Adriana. I'm the Vice President of the Brazilian Association of Librarians. And this is an institution that works with the civil society. And the idea is to bring back libraries to Brazil. And one of our partners is the Reading Club, and it's part of the one of the ODS, the United Nations ODS, an International Publisher Association, with the sponsor of the Brazilian law. So welcome our guests. It's a pleasure to have you all here with us this afternoon. Um, Dedicating this time to talk about this project, I'm going to introduce all of you. So here we have Julia Schwartz, um, publisher at Companhia das Letras. She has a degree in history by the University of São Paulo, and she's been responsible for the teens and kids for the past 20 years. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Our second guest is Miriam Leitão. She's a journalist, a writer, and since 1991, she is a columnist at Jornal Globo. She is an economic journalist for TV Globo. She's received many awards, one of them from the University of Columbia. She has 10 books published in fiction and nonfiction, and she has a story that was adapted to a TV series. She has two kids, both of them are journalists, Vladimir and Matheus Leitão. She has four grandkids, and she's married to the political scientist Sérgio Abrantes. Hello, Miriam. Welcome. You told everything about me. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for all of you who are part of this panel. Our next guest is Roger. He is a writer. Though this award is sponsored by the International Awarding, and which is considered like the Nobel Prize for young adults and children's books. He's received many awards, and he's considered an artist covered by as- the University Institution of Rio here. She has more than 3 books published, so he's a very dear friend, well known in this market, especially talking from us, like libraries and the books that are in libraries. So I summarized your CV, so welcome, Roger. I'm really happy to be here. I'm honored. Thank you, Adriana, for the library and the school are the most important places in the world and one of the most wonderful professionals. And I really honored to be here with wonderful women. Our next guest is Soraya. She's a professor, psychologist, and specialist in learning difficulties. She worked in the public education network in Rio. She was a coordinator for the pedagogical coordinator. She was a director of some school, and she's received many awards in this field. Hello, good afternoon. I'm really glad to be part of this round table. Share a book with Roger Mello is just wonderful. So good afternoon, everyone. And I'd like to call Sue Ellen. Sue Ellen is my colleague. She's a librarian as
Auxiliar,
well.
mediar, narrar, criar
She's worked
histórias com dados numéricos, textuais e elementos diversos.
in
É
several
graduada
elements. She has a degree in
universitárias,
librarian science. She has experience in libraries in the university, schools, especially in science of communication, and she has a degree by the University of São Carlos.
muito bem-vinda, Suelen.
Welcome, Svelen.
Muito obrigada, Adriana. Boa tarde a todos também. Estou muito feliz e honrada.
Thank you very much. I'm really honored to be here today. And I'd like to thank you for the invitation and the partnership of Paula Ferris from the Biblioteca de Paraisópolis. So we are going to start now. It's a conversation, it's an informal conversation. We're going to talk about the reading club, Brazil chapter, literature for kids, and the 17 goals of the sustainable development, the 17 ODS. And we're going to talk to people what they're doing and what becomes history. And to get into the mood of the 2030 ODS, and we're going to play a video and to show what are the goals or objectives for 2030. So we're going to see the video and then we're going to start or resume our conversation. In 2015, 193 countries got together to come up with the ODS to eradicate poverty, fight inequalities, try to contain global warming, and you're not going to leave anyone behind, whoever they are, wherever they are. My kids are dying. I don't have where to live.
I was refugee in Iran. I was refugee in Dubai, and now I'm a refugee in France.
Every day, more than 30,000 people are forced to abandon their houses, and people cannot see their abilities. They believe they are they have an ability. It wasn't a very good idea to sell me. 150 million kids are sold. I think that they don't consider us as human beings. One in every 3 women are victims of domestic violence. Here, women cannot do anything. That's the life of these people and the goals that you need to change, like power, bring loose to my kids. If I had studied, my situation would be different. Because if everyone had food at home, they can start thinking. So they could be poor, but they will have intelligence in their mind to get out of their situation. The objectives can change the world for everyone, year after year, goal after goal, and to reach them, because here on earth, we are all part of a mission. I have mine.
I've left my husband to be with a woman, and for me, that's a huge step in my country as an African woman to do that. I do have a strong voice, and I'm strong as a woman speaking for myself.
Nous devons dire au
We
monde
need to say the word that we exist, that we are there. And I'm sure that no misery, no extreme poverty is not a fatality. My son received a diploma. He's not like me. he's already one step ahead, and he can reach for a better future, or shoot for a better future. All objectives are should be followed by everyone. The promise not to leave anyone behind. Everyone should have an opportunity, a fair opportunity in life, whoever they are, wherever they are. We need everybody to meet or comply with this promise to know what you can do, access, leave no one behind. I don't know if you had already seen it. Every time I watch this movie, it's just a huge impactful. And to paraphrase what Angela Betty so talked about, this video not only call for reason, is makes us it touches us and makes us feel to try to contribute for a better world. So now I'm gonna pass the floor to Julia. Julia, if you can talk a little bit about uh, how you perceive this the work that we do with the ODS and the 2030 agenda. Well, it's a pleasure, as I said, to be here. It's an opportunity for me to be here to listen what such important people have to say, and also talk a little bit about this project, who is crucial, and that's the foundation to select. From my point of view, it's very rich, very diverse, and it can help everybody to get to help the books to reach other schools and other readers. And you were talking about emotion, and they really touch us, because we all of us in this um, round table believe in the power of stories. The present ourselves to this whole diversity. And I think literature is our first invitation to travel, um, in a sense that it takes us from our life, from our country, and even from our body, and present us to a war a word that we didn't know before. That's a uh, very enjoyable trip. But on the other hand, it has this introspection point of it, and at the same time inviting us to leave these new realities and live uh, in or in somebody's skin. And literature teaches us something that is very important, at least from my point of view, to form a human being. It helps us to how it teaches us empathy, to put on the shoes of somebody else. And when we talk about books, we talk about two narratives, the textual and the visual. And what I want to tell you is that literature and reading, it broadens our universe. And I think that's why, as a publisher, I've always believed that books are country, that they don't have their own countries. And the idea of publishing foreign classics, and for me, books, not only they're not part of a nation, they are their own way of traveling. And and I think during the pandemic, it was made very clear to us, people staying at home and reading more books to try to uh, quench this need for fantasy. The book makes us feel alive, because we do have this incredible capacity of abstraction. It allows us to leave um, our life to the outside, and so many other lives within ourselves. And we tell the story since we've been telling stories since uh, human is human. We used to do that through paintings, because telling stories is something we've always been. We are narrating something that happened. When you write an email, when you remember something from the past, or when you plan and dream for the future, this is always a narrative. We are always narrating stories. It's part of our modus operandi. And books and kids, they are the perfect combination because they speak the same language, and that's the language of fantasy. Because fantasy, actually, if you start thinking about it, that's the natural children's language. People experiment, they live through fantasy. For example, at a certain age, they kids just want to read stories with a wolf. Actually, they want to feel the fear through fiction. It's a safer way to be in the forest with a wolf there in this environment that is a controlled environment, so they can experience fear, but not much. That's why I dedicate my life in f- my life to literature books. And I think in the history of humanity, it's been a huge part of it. And in this format that's been tested and proved. And but at the same time, it's such a powerful object because it helps people to show that the word is diverse, and that's why it's beautiful. And I think that's the strength of literature. That's the power of literature. It opens a door for us to know the different. And once we open this door, you can never close it. And knowing that, I've always been concerned about the multiplicity, and I've been reflecting a lot about that. We still have a lot to do so we can represent people in books, like George Floyd's death and um, the murder of many Black people in Brazil. They made it, um, it made it, brought it to light the need of bringing Black people to this field. And I think somehow it's good because I do believe in education. And I think that we are always learning, we are broadening our vision. And I do believe in the new generation. I think that we are taking a huge step towards um, a more egalitarian world where we have a place for everyone, where differences are respected and no one stay behind. It was so strong in the video we just heard. I have two teenage daughters, and I can follow the huge change in their speech when I compare to my teenage years, not only in the respect eh, to everyone, but also the way they look at the country, they're concerned about the future, um, more aware of the environment, and they have more access to information. And I think in this roundtable, in this panel, I think that's how we are going to do it, and spreading narratives that represent how rich and how diverse this world is, narratives that help us to create a present that's not compromising our future. When I spoke with Beth the other day over the phone, she told me how happy she was with the mission of selecting the books for the library of the ODS. And I think she was so happy with this task because she knows the how powerful this list is and how powerful books are to reach kids, and that will make her future better. That's why I dedicate my life in doing what I do. So what writers and illustrators do and how it can reach the readers. From my point of view, we actually we haven't been very good in living on Earth so far. We know that we need to change some behaviors and beliefs. We need to invest a lot in education, um, democratization of knowledge, making books um, circulate all over to have um, more better adults in 2030. As I told Beth, better in doing than talking. So I think it's a good opportunity for me to learn and think a little bit about our work. So I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to be part of all that. Thank you, Julia. And now I wanna listen to Miriam about um, how she sees her work, the agenda, the ODS, the dangerous life of birds, right, Miriam? It's a pleasure. Before anything, I'd like to wish you all, everybody who's here, everybody in this panel, I want to wish you health in such a difficult moment that we are all experiencing. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a huge pleasure when Beth invited me. I accepted right away because uh, you see how privileged I am. I have Roger Mello, such a well-known um, illustrator, librarians like Swellen, um, publishers like Julia, and they are already in the Brazilian market with Professor Soraya. It's a real pleasure to be here with you today. Today, I'm a economy journalist, and today the American Central Bank and the Brazilian Central Bank are discussing interest rates, and I here talking about books, and that is wonderful. That was my choice, the economy discussion, and that's my main field of work. And now I have a children's book. So what is that? And actually, that has been a huge challenge, but also a huge pleasure to write books. The first book, the one that Adriana showed you, um, The Life of Small Birds, was award that it received an award as a revelation author because nobody really believed that I would get out of the closet as a writer because that's what I like to do, write books. I was a reader when I was a child, and I wanted to pass to other kids the pleasure of reading. But at the same time, I got into this world later in life, and I want to pass on some messages. And the messages, they have a lot to do with the ODSs because this first book is about environmental protection of a certain area, and also is how we can cooperate and to reach the same goal. And the number 17 is of the ODS is cooperation for action. And in my book, at a certain point, the little birds are um, fighting to protect an area, and they are invaded by those birds with no trees, and they get this dilemma: are you going to fight with them or try to convince them to go for the same objective? And then the idea of a joint action wins. And I want to show it because of the illustrator. That's a wonderful book. That's the action time. So all birds together starts thinking, and that's the story. And the other books that I wrote following the same path of sustainability, which is um, it, which is always present in my literature, but also the acceptance of diversity among people. When I was writing Flavia and the Chocolate Cake, we talk about racial differences. And I want to tell this story to tell you, how do I learn? How can I learn to get into this world that I wasn't supposed to based on my career? When I launched Flavia and the Chocolate Cake, I brought kids from San Gonzalo, from a poorer area, to Leblon, a richer area of the city. And one of the kids from the poorer area, I was playing with the kids. They had to color people, and they have many colors to use and people of every color. And a kid, this very small kid from San Gonzalo was interviewed and asked if he liked the story. And he said, yeah. And he said, what was the story about? And she said, the story is the following. Everybody, actually, people are from uh, every color. I don't remember the sentence, but that was the idea. You can be of any color, and that's the idea. That was the idea, actually. And getting into this world has been uh, very important for me, especially in the small um, things. One day I was writing autographs, and she told her mother, Mom, her handwriting is awful. And the mother tried to explain the
Para a mãe que tudo bem, eu tinha entendido o recado, eu expliquei para a criança que jornalista anota muito correndo.
and that journalists they don't have time to write, and they're and what I loved about it is the honesty, how honest kids are, and telling the story for kids in Finalegia has always been a challenge and a learning activity. Learning how to read to kids. Oh my God! So you think that you know how to read, and you have to read for kids. It's very challenging. Adriana asked me to talk a little bit about the work that I do, and I've written 6 books, and I'm writing another one right now, and I want to develop all of these values. But at the same time, to be a good story. It's not um, like someone um, teaching someone. No, kids need to want to be in the world of literature, in the world of books. And like building empathy is a very interesting idea that Juliet just developed when she told us her point of view. So we had a huge impact from this video that nobody can stay behind, and the awful news that a lot of people are staying behind more than ever. Brazil is a very unequal country, and it getting worse and worse. We do have numbers. I can give you the numbers. The loss of income for the poorer people is a lot higher than the loss of income in the average. And the social distance is getting higher, larger and larger, and that creates a weakness in Brazil, prevents Brazil to progress. And these inequalities are increasing right now. Kids, poor kids, they cannot study because they don't have internet, they don't have good equipment, and they cannot learn virtually. It's hard. Only rich people, middle class and up, can learn and adapt to this new teaching way. I mean, far away from the teacher. Unfortunately, that's our reality, and we need to face it because after the pandemic, our country is gonna get out broken. Politically, you are broken and more unequal. So our task now is huge, or larger than it was, like teachers, librarians. They're going to be part of this search to try to reduce all these inequalities. The inequality got larger, not only uh, within the countries, but also between countries. Like the objective of health is farther and further away. Like it will go for health to everyone and well-being to everyone, um, quality education to everyone. We need to be aware of this specific time. We have the pandemic, and in our case in Brazil, we have a conflict and an action from the government going the opposite way from what they should go. So it's a very difficult time for us here. I had 10 minutes to to talk. Final thing, this panel is for us to remember that we cannot give up our dreams. We have 17 ODS, and at the end of the day, it's just one goal: make the world a better world. So each one of us in our field of work should do that. And now those ODS are more important than ever. We knew go after them, and in this post-pandemic world when we are licking our wounds, um, and build a better world. And I think we need to, it's urgent. We need to be more aware than what we are right now. As a country, we want a country with less inequalities, a country that are looking for this sustainable development. Thank you, Miriam. I think that's exactly that. We can debate more. We cannot dissociate anything. We are we are 10 years to go to 2030, and we have the pandemic bringing more challenges, and we have the inequalities in Latin America and the Caribbean. It's the most unequal region in the world, and Brazil is now part of the map of hunger. And yeah, I agree totally with you, and I think everybody here agrees that it's a call, and literature is playing its role in within this ecosystem that we are part of to fight for this better world. And we have the tools to do so. Now, I'd like to pass the floor. Can I ask Sue Ellen? I'm gonna go for ladies first because one of the ODS, number 5, it's empower women and girls. So Swellen, with you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's wonderful to be here with you today with such uh, wonderful professionals like Miriam, Julia, Adriana, always following us. She's a great example of librarian for all of us who work in this area. And there are many issues that go beyond the library. And I can tell you that 2030 agenda incorporates an action plan for all type of people, different ages, places, social class, and that indicates within the 17 ODS and 169 targets a way to promote sustainable development, sustainable in an environmental, economical, and social sense, without compromising present generations, but to all future generations. That's a message for us who work as librarians, educators, social workers. It's very clear, but sometimes for kids, well, we need to make it more playful, the image, the imagination, music, and the different artistic languages that go beyond the relationship with literature. So, um, in front of all that, the reading club from the Brazilian ODS in Portuguese are very important to our work. Many libraries of the public schools, we have 46 special schools called the CEOs, and I work in one of them. We work these objectives and goals very directly with we did a curatorship with a reading club and reading a constant reading the 17 ODS in our projects. I think this path is more clear to us, and also it makes it easier to changing to a more playful language to our audience. We work mainly with kids. Of course, we have different from 0 to old people with schools, community um, learnings, community radio, but kids from 6 to 12 they do need us to take their hands and take them to our archives, mediate reading in different ways so can discover this pleasure of reading. Because sometimes an adult, and I think this is a reality that we can see around this library in different points of the outskirts of the city of Sao Paulo. The adults say, I don't like to read. I don't like. But sometimes these adults had never been introduced to reading, especially because the literate and non-literate content, they go through different topics and different world realities, and everyone has a subject that interests them. So kids, they are our main focus, not only through um, storytelling and workshops, but also reading clubs and librarians in all those special schools. They work with organization, uh, treatment, recovery, and mediating information and knowledge, including memory and the memory of what is around these schools and these communities as a whole. We can work the 17 ODSs because there's a multidisciplinarity in this type of work of a librarian that goes through all topics, all areas of knowledge, all types of literature to all audiences. And that is possible. When I read the 775 uh, works that were selected, that was made it very clear for me. Without having the access to this list, we've worked indirectly, but since 2018 in the Library of Heliópolis, we've been working with some of those ODS in reading mediation, especially the ODS in quality education, aiming at quality education to guarantee inclusive education and allow opportunities throughout life to everyone. Because reading for kids and introducing the pleasure of reading and diversity, biodiversity to kids promotes and also guarantee quality in this learning process, because the imagination that we find in children literature broadens the point of view, the vocabulary, and the way you can express yourself and understand other texts, including textbooks that the kids have contact with through images or text, because kids that they always have the illustration and the images, the figures, and talking to each other. And quality education goes through the public education when we do this sort of mediation. And taking into account another ODS, which is reduce inequalities within countries and among them. Once in one of our libraries, a public library, we are in a space with lots of inequalities that these audience are facing on their daily life. From the weaker side of it, to introduce children's literature can awaken the dream. And because they are facing these inequalities, their contacts of inequality, sometimes these dreams are stolen from them. Being very realistic about it. And when we introduce a different universe through um, young adults and children, they can start to see the world differently, and we can awaken these dreams, reduce inequalities through knowledge and imagination. And that's the literature. Another objective is gender equality. When we empower women and girls in our archives, we have many books that talk about the qualities, how the new fairy tales with princess, and how we can recount it. How can you be a girl and a princess in a world where the reality can be more of equality between men and women and all genders in the society. And also, another objective that's part of our project is to promote civic communities, promote access to justice to everyone, and build efficient institutions and inclusive in all levels, because peace is very important, so that these kids can dream, can read, can discover reading, discover books. They need to be well fed. They need infrastructure, access, and the public library uh, meet this role of access, because we guarantee a free access to literary works, and through internet and so on we can make this sort of access, and those potential equality and how people consume literature can be broadened. Of course, that's not ideal, but the public library sometimes it has the role of the school library, because we know that ideally uh, not all public schools have a library the way it should be, and that's part of our inequality. And the public library get close to the schools, and because these libraries are within these educational centers, and they are part of the community and have reading rooms, and because these land that that all these communities, uh they've they've had a history of violence and dispute. Promoting peace and justice, and that's part of the ODS 16, is can really relate to all that, because the books, 175 books that were selected for the ODS reading club, we can work very happily with all of them. It's really wonderful to be able to access this list and think about how we can work with them. But this special objective, peace, is very important. And that's where I like to say and tell you about a special project that you have at the Heliópolis Community Library. It's the Guardians of the Library. It's a project that was born around in 2017, around that, in a context where many kids, preteens, 6 to 14 years old, they used to go to the library. It's a very large library, 3 floors, an auditorium, huge, and they would go there to play, run around the hallways playing with books and so on and so forth. And you know, and of course, in the space of the public library, we have to receive these people, and we can do that in different ways. It's very complex, but also very necessary. So superficially speaking, us librarians, they could say, okay, that's a place of silence, get out of here, don't stay here with us, we have people studying. But that's not what we try to do. We try to call these people and talk to these kids. We call them for a talk. What's your name? Where do you live? What do you like to do? And they started to talk to us. And we talked, and we developed a connection with these kids. Sometimes parents will have to work 24/7. And we started talking at that time based on the uh, a model that you got from Portugal. We put together a mediator commission for libraries, and with that, we started to have dialogues with these kids, basically boys. We had 2 or 3 girls, but mainly boys. And that's when I started working in this library, when I took this position. That was already happening. It was just the beginning. So, talking
É,
to them,
fomos introduzindo a
um,
leitura aos
we were
poucos, porque
introduced,
logo no
we
início
tried
eles
to
não
introduce them to
não
reading
sabiam
little by
ler,
little.
eles queriam
But the
ficar
kids would say, we don't like
deitados
to read, we
no,
like to
em
play with
casa.
books. We don't have
Era
books at
uma
home.
coisa
It
totalmente
was
inusitada.
something new to
Aos
us.
pouquinhos
Little
conversando,
by
passamos
little,
pelas áreas
talking to them, we
kids,
started
depois
to
fomos
HQs. Well, that's like
brinquedos mais extensos,
cartoons or
introduzindo as figuras.
and then we started to short books and we then books with some pictures and they would come to the meetings. They wanted to read. They would get a book and they said, okay, I want to read. They call us ants. Ants, I want to read. And these boys, they are usually selling candy
Muitas vezes vão para um shopping center
at
querendo
red lights, when they
não
do
são
go to
perseguidos ali
the
no local de
shopping
trabalho.
mall and
E
they
muitas
are
vezes
asked
a
to
biblioteca
leave
poderia isso,
because they
deixá-los em
don't
casa,
play the
usar a
part.
plataforma, né,
Some
serviços
other
digitais.
libraries that don't
Enfim,
receive them,
vários trabalhos
we are
de
different, we
leitura. Então,
receive them.
sempre muito
And we
sobre
did a
leitura.
lot of work
Sempre
in
trabalhando
reading.
sobre
That became a
esses
reading
temas,
club,
que
always
são assuntos que eles se
working
interessam. E a biblioteca
with
não ficou só
listening to them. And with
biblioteca
that,
para a
it
comunidade, mas
didn't,
também de comunidade para a
what we
biblioteca.
did,
E eles
it,
também
it,
traziam
it wasn't just from the library to the community, but it was from the
traziam os
community
próprios
to the library.
estudantes,
They
das
brought
famílias, dos
their
amigos,
stories,
que se
what they
mesclavam, se
wanted to
misturavam
read,
com as
and
histórias
they
dos
would
outros estudantes.
mix the
Então,
stories of
conheci
their
estudantes de muitas
families, of their
escolas,
background to the stories in books. For example, there was a 13-year-old kid who told the story of his life that he had never told anyone before. It was some sort of a therapy through books, and it's a very precious work for us. And thinking about a book, the Bob Marley's son. They love Bob Marley and they love that book because it's an optimistic message that everything's gonna be all right. They have parts in English and they will read, we will listen to the music, and that's why the different artistic language they mix with literature. And we would bring them the song, they would dance and sing. Some days they didn't want to sit in on their desk, they want to sit at the terrace on the floor, and always in a circle they would read and talk. It was very touching. We did a presentation at the Brazilian council chamber, and not all of them could go, but we managed to have a partnership with Elisete Moraes, was one of the directors. They managed to get a bus to take us to the Brazilian, to the Sao Paulo council chamber. And in this context, one of the participants, one of the kids said, here at the library, I've learned that reading, we find out that we don't need to solve everything with violence. He used his own expression to say that reading, we understand that violence is not the best way to solve our problems. And that was just wonderful. It goes hand in hand with objective 16, peace. That's just an example of the work that we do. Thank you. Wow, Swellen. So many things. Listening, that's very important. I think reading has a lot to do with affection. You don't need you cannot get people to read if you don't have this sort of affective environment. Soraya, now with you. Hi, how are you? Good afternoon once again. When Roger said that the school and the libraries are the most important places in the world, for sure, definitely. And when we think and talk about literature, school open doors. When Swellen uh, brings to the regular school, their reading space of the school is just reading room, right? However, regular school today, the reading space are everywhere. The reading room is just a reference of where the books are. Now, books, they transit around the classrooms, the hallways. So everywhere we have the invitation for reading. When Beth invited me and I started thinking what to tell you all in this journey of 30 something years where literature has always been present, I I joke that literature is able to do everything. Mediator students, for example, what Swellem just said, literature can handle us mediating students when we have to read and teach discipline, the absence of the student, why this that student doesn't go to school. That's an invitation for the student to come to school. And when we start thinking about the agenda, the 2030 agenda, we go through many issues that us teachers, we know it very well. Our objectives, because every time we are working based on the goals, based on objectives, targets, what we want to reach, what we want to achieve. And when this possibility is the ODS Reading Club, wow, that's when we feel in that we are in a comfort zone because the ODS, they have a direct talk with what Swelling just said, like reading books that can be brought to life, but also with books, we can relate the actions that we have to do. So it has a lot to do with comforting to have reading as a conductor, as a thread that can allow us or that we can guarantee that all of us are there, that everybody can have a quality education, that everybody can have health and well-being. So I'd like to read here just a small part of Yolanda Ray's book, who invites us to understand literature in school. We need stories and poetry and the whole literature possible in schools, not to highlight main ideas, but to favor sentimental education, not to identify the the morale at the end of the day, but to entrepreneur the old class of knowledge and know about others. The main objective of a teacher is to follow their students in this task, creating an environment of discussion and dialogue so that within every text we can weave experiences and particularities of every kid and youth with their names and their history or their backgrounds. So listening to this kid is a possibility that literature allow us. What are the stories that this kid can bring us? What are the stories that this kid bring us that have a dialogue with our stories? Because Yolanda says that uh, reading teacher is only a voice that tells something, a hand that open doors and draft paths, bring the soul of text to the soul of readers. And to do its work, it cannot forget that not only teachers, they are human beings with light and shadows, with a sacred life in a house of words with their own stories. Their work is risky and full of risk and uncertainties. And their reading texts are not only books, but also readers. It's not about uh, a work, but an activity. And it's not part of school books and uh, uh, um, our manual. When kids leave school with, they will remember the essence of these thoughts that were woven between lines. In this time of pandemic, we've heard a lot of stories about people who uh, went after literature to comfort them, like a nice hand in this time of mourning. And we think about our teachers that had to reinvent themselves when Miriam brought this issue of online classes. All teachers had to reinvent themselves. We have a huge difference between public school students and private school students in Brazil. And I'm not telling you that private schools manage to reach or achieve all of their goals. That would be another discussion, but literature could go, it should be able to go through these gaps. I hear some teachers who said, I had to read a book to be able to teach a content. So literature has this balm. Literature invite us. Literature enchant us. But not only that, it also enchant us. But not only that, sometimes we hear, oh, what can I do? My student doesn't like to read. It's very important for us teachers to be readers. Literature education is something that we have to learn and you have to teach. So for me to form readers, I need to learn, just like I learned how to teach my my kid to read. As a math teacher, learn how to teach algebra. Literature goes through all these gaps in school. Inside the reading room and outside the reading room. And what is most interesting, it's something that being able to observe is that for a long time, our task was to form readers, and only that was the task for the literature teacher and the Portuguese language teacher. And that has changed. And that's very significant because that's very meaningful, because when Swellen says that we have a difference between the library, the school library and the public library, because the school library needs the public library. Because if I want to form a student, where can this student exercise this task? Only with the school library. The school is an open door to invite the public library, to bring literature in, to guarantee that everyone has a better uh, life. The 175 books that were selected, they are a reference, and they open doors to other choices, other selections. Of course, that professor, that teacher that's already working the literature, when they read the list, they start thinking about other books that could be there. So the choice or this selection is already a facilitator. If me as a professor want to work the 2030 agenda through literature, I know where to start. But where to end? No, it's completely open. And that's the possibility that literature brings us. It makes you restless that once you get into this universe, you cannot get out. So I'm going to end my speech now with another text from Yolanda. With all this avalanche of messages and external stimuli, literature provides readers coordinates to name themselves and see themselves. And reading literature cannot transform the world, but at least can make it more inhabitable. Because the fact that we see ourselves in perspective and look within ourselves, and that contributes to open new doors to sensibility and understanding of ourselves and others. Very happy to be here sharing this roundtable with you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Soraya. And now our dear guest, Roger.
Do seu lugar, né, Roger? E aí, tanta.
Where you are, Roger, and lots of provocation from your video, everything that our colleagues just said. You have the floor. Fantastic, Adriana. I'd like to thank you all. I'm a fan of all of you, Adriana, Soraya, Median, Julia, Suwellen, um, and also we've always saying that a very important person, Beth, Sarah, the National Foundation of Youth and Kids Books. That's the entity that's been working later with children. Regina Yolanda Laura Sandroni, people who showed me that when you write a book, when you illustrate a book, actually you are taken by this network that Soraya just said. Uh, I'm here at the Instituto Quindin. My husband always tells me that we are working in a network, a sophisticated network. We are we it like a mesh that is used for the verbal text, but also the visual text, and that connects us to the idea of threads and weaving. The foundation is a member of IBI, the International Board of for Young People, and that was created by a wonderful woman, Yella Leopard, that after the war, she was a Jewish woman, and she creates the International Library of Munich, a reference center, fantastic, and IBI, IBY, it starts from the principle that the only way to promote peace around the world is through knowledge the knowledge of the other, character in children and young people literature. That's how you understand the pain of the other. And I'd like to thank you all, uh, to all these institutions, Brazilian publishers, the United Nations. We are talking about dreams that we dream together. I remember Siddhartha Ribeiro saying that one of the most important societies that he have heard of is a society where adults would get together to listen to the children's dream. It's a different way to do or to make utopia. I'm from Brasilia, so we have wonderful utopists. In an age of having projects is something interesting. I think Miriam talked about that. We live in a context that we're going to exclude books because books is this powerful instrument. I grew throughout a dictatorship where my aunts would throw books out of the window because they were dangerous. And the authoritarian powers, they are afraid of this subject. And it's fantastic for me to be here today because here because a person called Enreduana. It's a partnership with my wonderful partner Julia and Mariana, Lily Schwartz, and um, Julia's mother, and a little talk about her because first of all, I'd like to say something. I'm an illustrator, but I like the word of designer. Actually, I think myself as a designer. What we do is think with a line. So we don't talk about that much, but the absence of image in the narrative as an element of personal expression in the world of word. The word the is the most important invention, but image is given. One is from nature, and the other is our, the word is the time machine, if I can say that. But when I think about drawing or designing, and for me, drawing is designing, as Julia said, is launch yourself to fantasy. We we don't give importance to fantasy in our society, but from the pen to a skyscraper or a spaceship, everything was fantasy in the mind of someone. Every all of that was a design, a drawing, as Soraya and Suellen like to say, to listen to kids, to respect the reader. They are the most important than reading is the readers, he or she. And through this time machine word, we get to Inreduana, a woman, the first person to sign a text, the first person to write poetry. 4,000 years ago. She wasn't white for sure. She was from the Mesopotamia, so she was definitely not white. She was the daughter of the first emperor in practice. She was the first woman with a historical registration, with proven that she with complexity that she writes poetry very with a lot of quality to a deity where who she marries. And it's something very interesting because she talks about Inanna, this deity, and she's talking about her exile. She includes herself in the narrative, so she anticipates a concept of a romance, of a epic poetry, like 4,300 years ago. The this narrative, why she was banned from the historical literature. If you have so much proof and documentation, Morgan Library this year is doing an exhibition about whatever she wrote. She wrote in uh, clay plates. So we cannot say that her works perpetuate, or we cannot say that it doesn't perpetuate. Like 4,300 years ago, I like to draw the attention to that we're not only talking about the ODS, gender equality, but we are also talking about other voices in a world that is Eurocentric, other voices like 5,000 years ago, like many years before Iriduana here in South America, we had a very advanced society. The Carao Subi were blooming with a type of writing that some people don't consider as a writing, but it is the quipus and proto quipus. Quipus are like a um, meshes. Again, the metaphor to weaving and fabrics. Those quipus was made of colorful threads they put in the margins of the city of Caral. Um, cotton was already red or blue. So that is seems like fiction, but no, it's true. I remember a researcher from Peru, native Peruvian, she was uh, untangling a quipus so careful because it's a millennial piece of work. An archaeologist was telling this researcher, you were telling her, no, quipus is not a text. It's not a textuality. It's for accounting. We know that telling stories and counting landscapes and counting numbers, everything is associated with the idea of like in the Latin language, it's counting. Count is also tell. With this Peruvian archaeologist, she was untangling these quipus and she got to a three dimension. It was a three dimension writing, and that's the accounting of life. How we read, the way we read the DNA, for instance. We are talking about a civilization that expresses through the object, a book that's been through so many forms or formats, through clay plates, um, some sort of a pen made out of wood, or those painted books from African societies where scribas, they were philosophers that they were illuminators of that time. And you go through a gender in the fantastic Mayan codes in Mexico. They were very complex books with very complex and text and images. And you get all the way to the codes, the oldest codex. Uh, it's a golden book, Etruscan book found in Bulgaria. What's the oldest book in the world? We need to think about how can we ask this question. What is a book for you? Books can be the images in the caves here in Brazil or an art gallery. Does that really matter? What matters is the connection of narratives. So in the 2030 agenda that we are part of, what we can realize is that again, we are can we are listening to kids project their dreams so that people involved in this utopia can be part of the utopia, and so that this can perpetuate like this line of this thread that right now takes me to the cities of Caral in old Peru. Thank you. Wonderful, Roger. Thank you so much. I'd like to tell you that people in the chat, there are a lot of conversation. The economy, how we get organized to face all these issues. People giving their testimony on how reading literature is one of the tools, important tools that we have, and reverberate the agenda, because I think the agenda through um, the agenda, we need to tell the world that we are committed to a better world. People giving their personal testimonies and how they work and um, taking this to their work environments. And in this sense, I'd like to hear a little bit from us. We still have 15 minutes to go. I'm going to go around quickly. How do you see these sort of readings? We have a question from Paula Felice. who is a librarian, her question is follow this line. How do you see the readership and kids and young people? How do they contribute to this construction to make a better world, a more human and fairer world? How do you see all of that? What's the potential of this club from your point of view? And I think Julia told us a little bit about that. Talk a little bit about the ODS. How can you start talking about it? How it changed the perspective of what you do? Julia, do you want to start? Well, I think that this initiative and this list, I think Suellen and Soraya, they've already said it pretty well, the importance of this list and this curatorship. Us, talking from my point of view as a publisher, uh, the publishing this list uh, but had a great repercussion and many people commenting. It's one of the events that uh, really, really resound in people. And you can see how strength this project is. The books are there. We've talked a lot about the importance of the potentiality of transforming readers. And but if they don't get there, if they don't get the other end, if they cannot re- uh, get to the readers, we cannot get this magic. If you don't have Soraya, Suellen, and Beth, and Adriana, and so many people involved that are crucial to help. Um, uh, Canan Ferraz was talking about his production as a writer. He's a kids book writer, and he says that he thinks it's really magic how books can open this door, this communication channel. But we need a mean to propagate it to all that. So I think this reading book is crucial for that. And I think it makes books go around and more readers to find them. Miriam, do you want to say something? Yeah, I think that the idea of choosing books um, for this context of looking for goals, I think it's just genius. We're going after the ODS. Public policies are going in that direction, but I'm talking about reading books on itself as weapon, if I could say that, towards what we want and what we dream of. I want to talk a little bit about, I mean, this panel was so interesting. I want to talk about a little bit that I've learned so far. Julia talking about the need of literature in Brazil and other countries. And for it to have all voices, it cannot be a single voice of the the authorities or the white man. We need all voices there so we can go after these objectives. Swellen told this wonderful story of receiving these people, something that could become a conflict actually became an inclusion in literature. And that's a wonderful story that she told about that community education center. Soraya talked about a crucial uh, issue that the teacher is on their own, trying to reinvent themselves. They are in such a battle, such a struggle. I want to hug you, Soraya, because I know how much each one of us suffered. How can I do what I used to do in the classroom? I'm not there. My students are far away from me. Roger, it's so wonderful because Roger, he said what it means to be an illustrator. And he told us stories, and these stories went to 5,000 years ago, and he's a storyteller, and that's wonderful. And I wanted to tell you how this panel, how the round table reflected exactly what we are looking for. Books as part of the effort to achieve the objectives we cannot let go. We cannot give up these objectives. Thank you, Miriam. Sue Ellen? Well, I've learned a lot here today, lots of reflections, validated from all of you, what you all said, different perspectives, reading and um, producing books, telling stories, not only the content of stories, but the view of those who make these stories and those who publish these stories. So I'm really glad to be here to share. And I believe that reading has many important roles. And I'd like to mention um, scientists in our history, the history of humanity, it's Albert Einstein. And once he said that if you want kids intelligent, we should read fairy tales to them. And if you want them to be even more intelligent, we need to tell more fairy tales to them. And that goes hand in hand with another thought from Einstein, that imagination is as important as knowledge, because imagination involves the world and knowledge is kind of limited. So I think that this work that we do with reading uh, has a lot to do put, to empower these kids and make them believe that they can change the world and build a fairer society, equalitarian society to all of us. And within all that, we have many books in this 175 list. They get together, and there are some very important that talk about sustainable cities, um, reducing inequalities, and talking about the history of our story in Brazil, our um, all our leaderships, the three races that we have here, Black, uh, Native Brazilians, and Europeans, and that lead us uh, to the past, the present, and the future through imagination. So thank you so much. I just wanted to say something else. I remembered something about what the kid from São Gonçalo, what she said when she read my book. I tried to reproduce it, but it wasn't as smart as what she said. She said the following: the conclusion is that every skin color, everybody has the skin color, because the skin color is every color. So um, it's a wonderful sentence. I'm sorry to interrupt, but it was just so smart. Soraya? I like to end by once again saying how touched I am by this panel. I cannot deny that we are in a very difficult time. We feel that everything is stuck. And when you realize that there is a production behind all that to bring light, uh, we f- we we feel that we can go on. We have to go on, and literature shows some new paths to us. When Julia talks about representativeness and racism, we have many um, thoughts and ideas that are trying to fight all the extremes. I remember a situation that we uh, felt in schools when we were asking a student to come home, to come to school, and when we realized the way the student live and what he had to do to come to school, and we got really sad because we couldn't get him out of where he was living. So our way was to bring him to tell stories and visit him and tell him stories. So literature is that. Literature is medicine, and literature is healing. I'm really happy to be here today. Never be tired of saying that.
Pode comentar.
Eu?
Você.
Roger?
Tá certo.
Yeah, your turn. Okay.
Bom, eu queria lembrar
Well, I
que
like to
que eu amei o título,
remember,
porque
I love the
as
topic,
histórias,
those who
né? A gente
tell
está
and those who
falando
take
de um encontro que
the
precisa
stories,
ser
because it's a meeting that
realizado, né?
need
Esse
to
encontro
happen.
entre livro
This
e criança,
reunion
leitor e
between book,
leitora,
so this meeting between or
diversos,
between
né?
kids
Então,
and
a gente
books,
vive
the
num país em
kids
que
they
a
create and they
educação de uma
subvert,
criança
and to
muitas
make
vezes
a
significa
book get to a kid
levá-lo
sometimes
numa barca
is
para um
take
lugar a
this
pé,
book in a
né?
boat to the
Porque
very
Deus
tiny
tem uma
community in the middle of the Amazon
série
forest,
de
uh,
diferenças que faz
trying
o
to
nosso
draw
país e o mundo.
this
Então, quando a gente
network of
fala disso, a gente
differences
fala
that we have in this
também
world and in this
que
country and in the
é
world.
uma
When
revista
we
em
talk about
que as
a book,
bibliotecas
we
são
talk about
fundamentais,
the
mas
chain
também
of
as
events
livrarias,
together. We
a
have
literatura,
publishers,
professores que, aliás,
libraries,
bibliotecários, mais uma vez, são as mais importantes
librarians.
do mundo.
It's the most
O
important
Brasil, desde sempre, se
profession in the
caracterizou
world. They are the example
de imaginação,
of
como o Suelen, uma
imagination,
palavra que
as
envolve a
Swellen
palavra
said.
imagem, né? As
It's
pessoas têm muita
a
dificuldade
word
de
that
falar que não
involves
usam essa letra o
uh,
tempo todo. Eu
the
sempre
word
digo que essa
image,
palavra chamada
imagination, image. It's a
imaginação é uma
metaphor.
coisa e que tem que mudar também
It's
no
all
nosso
that. And I like
país.
to
Não deixe
remind you that
de
in our
existência dos
country
Estados
we
Unidos
have
nesse momento nunca
a
esteve tão exposto à
spotlight
destruição.
that is
Mais uma
exposed
vez
to
nesse
destruction
momento, entendeu?
under
Então,
this
que a gente
government.
use também os
And we
livros.
need to use
E
books.
aí, eu acho que
And
também é
well,
muito importante
I think
a
that's very
maneira da
important
gente
because the way
gerar mais
we
e mais vínculo entre
generate
crianças
more
e
connection
animais e
between
ecossistemas
kids
e
and
plantas
animals and
através da
ecosystem and
ficção,
plants and through
como esse livro
fiction,
que a Miriam Leitão trouxe do
just
livro
like
dela,
what
que é
Miriam
muito é
said
muito
about her
bom.
book. It's
Então
very
acho
great
excelente o trabalho com livros também
to work
interativos,
with
né?
books.
Cada vez mais
We work
elaborados, bem
with
diagramados. A diagramação
information.
é
Books are well
extremamente importante,
designed,
mas precisa
well
de histórias que
edited, and well
partam de
published. And we
bichos
need
e
stories
envolvam
about
bichos e pessoas
animals and the
no
relationship
Brasil
with
para que as
people
pessoas
in
tenham cada
Brazil
vez
so
mais
people
essa
can create
relação, porque
a
senão
better
a situação
relationship.
fica essa
Otherwise,
coisa
preservation is
abstrata
something
demais.
too abstract. Okay,
Pessoal, vou dar algumas
great.
informações
Guys,
aqui
I'm going to
para
give you some information here.
como é que
I have
foi a
some
seleção
questions
dos
about how was the
livros,
selection
para
of
esclarecer quem
books.
está nos assistindo, que
For
às
those
vezes
who
os livros
are
que
watching us, the
dirigem
selection was based
a
with
CBN,
many
a
institutions
live
together
da parte da manhã
and
explicou, né, como essa
mornings
seleção
live
aconteceu.
explained about this
Para
selection.
mesmo
So
que os nossos
we
convidados
this
não tivessem que
roundtable,
ir nesse processo
there
de seleção,
our
fazer
guests here
seleção
weren't
dos livros.
involved in
E
this
aí,
process. So
Júlia, vou deixar
now, Julia,
aqui o
I'm
pessoal
gonna drop
interagir.
something to you.
Você
There's some
pode
people
começar
saying,
a conversar com as
how can we
editoras
talk
para poder
to
promover a
the
leitura
publishing houses so
desse
we can
virtual
promote
e as
reading
redes
in this
aí, as
virtual
redes
environment and
sociais. Eu já pedi para perguntar todas e
respecting
depois, Júlia, as
uh,
entidades têm muito
all
interesse
those
nisso. A gente já está quase
rights
terminando,
and
então
author
eu queria
rights and so
dizer
on and
que
so forth. We are
agradecer
about to end.
novamente a
So I'd like
presença
to
de
thank you
todos
all
vocês e
for being
compartilharem
here today
ideias,
and
saberes
sharing your
e
ideas and knowledge.
ficar aqui. Também fazer
And I'd
comentário
like
aí
to
bem
mention
alusível ao que a Miriam trouxe para a gente.
what Miriam just told us,
Em
that
março tivemos aí
in March we
o fórum,
had
né, de
the
monitoramento
forum
dos ODS,
of
onde
ODS of monitoring through the CPAO, and the CPAO is calling Latin America and the Caribbean to build a society of care. That was the agenda. Of course, the was basically about vaccination. That's uh, nothing to say about that. We all need vaccination. Developing worlds are doing that, and us, we need to get there. The education as a central issue, access to internet, not only schools, but some families, they were left behind. We have information that save lives. And once again, basic services. We have a society that will huge inequality. People will not a good way to live, access to food and water. So what we want to contribute to here, that we want to reverberate our commitment. Of course, the government has their goal, the society, but all of us, each one of us, need to do our part. And finally, once again, I like to say that we want to bring our solidarity to the family members and friends of those who passed due to COVID. And we know that many of them could be here with us if they had a different government. So, a lot of reading to all of us. Thank you again. Thank you for our audience and our partners that allowed this